morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to YSEALI Bootcamp 2021. All right, as we wait for more people to join us this morning, just want to give you a thank you so much for being here, and a big shout out to all our speakers that could join us and tune in, from some of them from across the globe, some of them closer to home. So thank you for being here. And I am Navin, a part of the BGBG and Mereka team, and welcoming all of you to this morning's webinar session. Right, so before we get into things, we'll just probably a warm up before we then get to hear from our exciting speakers, right? So I'm going to launch a quick. All right, things are a bit slow this morning. I crashed. All right, am I back, everybody? All right, let's go. We're just going to do a quick temperature check with everyone. So if you guys can see the poll on your screen now, take a good 30 seconds to answer how you guys are feeling today. Who are you looking forward to hearing from this morning's session? And what are the issues that you're concerned about, that maybe you want to touch on, maybe you're working on currently? Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. All right, everyone. All right, can't wait for lunch. People are excited, sleepy. I don't blame you if you're sleepy. It's been quite a rainy morning, most days in Peninsular Malaysia, and I hear in Sabah as well, rains are quite heavy. So please be careful, all of those going out and about in Sabah. All right. We'll just give you 5 more seconds and we'll end the polling. All right, let's see what you guys said. Most of you guys are excited. Thank you so much. We are excited too to hear from this amazing lineup. And yeah, like you guys want to hear from everyone. And all right, so quite divided across the different issues that you guys feel passionate about. Some of you working on wildlife restoration and deforestation as well. So thank you so much for all of those joining us today, and love to hear as well in the chat, like what you guys are working on, and feel free to input in as we start the conversation. So with that, welcome again to this session for this morning, prioritizing environmental conservation, with our wonderful speakers. And just to give a bit of background on some of you who have never seen or never known about what is YSEALI. So YSEALI is a program and also a network. If you haven't already joined YSEALI, I see some familiar faces here, so thank you for joining. But if you haven't joined YSEALI, it's a really great network to be a part of, that gives you a host of opportunities, even local, such as this bootcamp, but connect you as well to regional youth leaders that are doing amazing work across different sectors. So there will be a link in the chat to go and sign up. It's really simple. Just sign up provide your details. And once you start receiving newsletters from YSEALI, that's when you know you're a member, and look out for amazing opportunities coming up, right? So a little bit of explanation about our bootcamp. What we're a part of and what we're doing today is the 5 webinars that are the kind of conversation starters before we get into our civic engagement bootcamp. So we heard last week from 2 amazing speakers about diversity and inclusion, and what are the needs and the changes that are required to have a more well-rounded and inclusive narrative of our nation, right? So today we have our speakers that will be touching on their work in environmental conservation. And then the following weeks as well, we'll be covering different topics. You'll hear from some of the alumni from last year, as well as a panel of speakers touching on digital connectivity. And we'll be having a special guest from the city of Middleton, sharing how they do their civic engagement. So look out for the 3 webinars that are coming up. in the following weeks as well, every Saturday, 11 a.m. Right? So after all of that, what happens is the applications are actually open for the bootcamp. So we'll be selecting 40 change makers to join this 3-week program. And that's where you will get to learn how advocacy works. What are the tools and resources you need to start your campaign, right? Such as your strategy planning, your budgeting, your financing, how to execute your project, getting involved and being a part of different networks that are already working on these issues. That's some of the things that you'll get access to during the bootcamp. And of course, with that, you also get some seed funding to kickstart your campaigns, right? So these are some of the speakers and industry experts that we had from last year that will be sharing the content regarding all those different things. So as you can see, there are quite established and experienced panel of people, and we can't wait for them to share what they're doing with you, right? And like I mentioned, after all of that, you'll be pitching your campaigns to a series of judges and hoping to vie for some seed funds to kickstart your program, right? And with that, these are the sessions coming up, and we'll get into the one for today. These are amazing speakers for today. I will not introduce them. I will leave that to my dear friend Nasiri from Pacos Trust. And Nasiri has been working with Pacos Trust for 12 years and is currently the community organizer and area-based coordinator. He works a lot on the ground with the people and is experienced in documenting indigenous knowledge and mapping the community, as well as giving them training for leadership. So with that, Mr. Nasiri, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Navin. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's introduction make me a bit nervous. Yeah, hopefully this session can be move on. Yeah, yeah. Once again, thank you for this opportunity, especially for Yesali, give us opportunity to moderate the important session today. So, yeah. When we are from background from Navin, we are talking about environment conservation, especially in Borneo. Yeah, as far as we know that Borneo is we share to 3 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. And then Sabah in Sarawak is our largest state in Malaysia, and then we are very rich in terms of natural resources. We have oil, we have our forest, anything. Yeah. So today, our session, our webinar is very, very important. We have 3 speakers here. Kallang from Sarawak, Cynthia Ong from Sabah, and then our friends from Kaleo from Hawaii. Yeah. Yeah. Before we start, I'd like to mention that for those participants, actually this webinar is live in Facebook. Yeah, you can check it the chat box. So please can share to make sure our message to the others, to audience, to masyarakat yang berada di luar. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not talking much here because of I think most important thing is from our speaker. Yeah. Yeah. As far as we know, this webinar is taking 1 hour. Yeah, we have sharing all that thing, but our format, webinar format today, our flow today is we finish first the webinar, the sharing from our speaker, and then we have question and answer from participant. Yeah, so all your question just put in the chat box. So our friends, we trying to catch up all the question and then trying to answer. Yeah. Okay, we move our our webinar today. We have three speakers. First speaker is Peter Kallang. As far as we know, Peter Kallang is a chairman of Safe Rivers and ICCA chairman for ICCA for Southeast Asia. Yeah, a short biodata from Peter Kallang. Peter Kallang is a chairman and founding members of Safe Rivers, a Sarawakian organization that support and empower rural community to protect their land, rivers, watershed through capacity building, networking, research, education, and advocacy. Peter Kallang also very experienced working with community and very expert in terms of environment issue in Sarawak. So I give it the floor to Peter Kallang. Please, Peter.
Thank you very much, Nasiri, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm really glad to have this opportunity this morning. I will share my own experience in social engagement and environmental and human rights, championing the human rights and environment. So can you share the slides for us, please? Yes. Safe Rivers was formed in 2011. And like what Nasiri have mentioned earlier on, we support and empower rural communities to protect their land, rivers, and watershed through capacity building, networking, research, and education and advocacy. Okay, next slide. The formation of Safe Rivers was mainly triggered by the proposal made by the state government to build 12 hydroelectric dams in Sarawak. And before that, we already have 2 big hydroelectric dams in existence. So if built, these dams would have flooded thousands and thousands of hectares of land and also displaced thousands and thousands of people from their homes. So we got together and decided to work together, because before that there were a lot of people who protest, but there was no proper coordinations in the protest. So 8 NGOs came together, tried to work together, and then that's when we formed Safe Rivers. Next slide. Next slide. The first thing we did was defending. I would classify the way we approached this was 3 different steps in doing it. The first thing what we did was in defending. So we went out to do capacity building. We went to the villages and visited the people and asked them whether they knew that this proposal coming, the dam was going to be built. And luckily for us, the government or the dam owners did not go before us. We were the ones who first went out to tell the people about it. So we had the opportunity to tell all the different aspects of the dam affecting the human rights issue, affecting the environments and all that. And of course, we did a lot of networking. That means to say, not only to talk to the communities affected, but also to other NGOs from outside of the 8 NGOs that I mentioned earlier on. We also make connections with other NGOs who are dealing with human rights issues with regards to big projects like mega dams, and also overseas, not only in Malaysia. So we were able to start from day one, in other words, because we get the skills and knowledge from all these other NGOs, including other organizations outside of NGOs, including big organizations from various countries and international organizations. And with that, we were able to do the capacity building, which to say that we prepare the people, and then so that we don't do everything on our own, but empower them to do it for themselves. So next slide. All this were focused on non-violence action. Next slide, please. So the Baram Dam was cancelled. The last slide, it was cancelled. After the cancellation of the Baram Dam, we decided to do conservation. So this is an area which is in the same place that where the dam was going to be built in Baram. It is an area which is an area probably the only untouched forest in the whole of Sarawak, perhaps in the whole of Malaysia, which is never been touched. It is 283,000 hectares there in the forest, and 49% of it is still 28% of it is still primary forest. And you see the number of people still living there. Next slide. So this proposal was being approved by the government. You can see this from this picture on the 22nd of February 2017. It was approved. So with that, we have been working together with the government to see how we can put this area as a joint governance between the government, the community, and NGO. Next slide. So the next one is sustaining livelihood. Because it's not enough to just to do conservation, but you have to look after the people who are going to be there. We are not only conserving the environment, but also to conserve the culture, the tradition of the people there, respect the social order there and all that. So, and after that, we're also looking at how we can support the government in order to do the infrastructure, and then also doing the reforestation. So we are we had some very good news last year when this proposal was also accepted and endorsed by the ITTO. ITTO is the International Tropical Timber Organizations. They have endorsed it. So which means to say that part of this cost will be given by the countries who have been importing timber from Sarawak and Borneo. So the rest would be from the Sarawak government and the national government, federal government anyway. Next one. Thank you very much. So I have 2 minutes for you to ask questions because I'm supposed to talk in 8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for the presentation. So, yeah, Peter requests that anything question because Peter still have a time. Any question from the participant? Please type in the chat box. Yeah, type in the chat box, and then Peter can answer. Yeah, while we are waiting, the question coming from our participant. So yeah, we go to next speaker. So we have more time question and answer after this. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, Peter actually highlight what is been done a bit. Movement come out after the 11 hydro dam proposed by government in Sarawak, and then a lot of activities that have been done. One of that is capacity building, networking. So Peter also mentioned that in terms of conservation, we must be looking beyond on that. Yeah, beyond on that, must be looking who is living there. I mean, the peoples, yeah, living, who is living there, what is their livelihood, culture, and what is a social or how they are, what is the culture into that area. That's the point from presentation from Peter. Yeah. So we go to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Miss Cynthia Ong. Cynthia Ong is from Spiral. As far as in the short biodata, is Cynthia Ong is a very expert, yeah, in terms of facilitating process, partnership, and project that provoke ecology sustainable coexistence between groups, community, region, and nation. As far as we know, Cynthia Ong also one of the director of Forever Sabah. I think Cynthia can share more on that. So the floor is yours, Cynthia.
Thanks, Nasiri. Good morning, everyone. Very grateful to be on this panel and in this session with you. I am engaged in a few different things, one of which I'll talk about, which is Forever Sabah. But I think given the audience here today, mostly young people, I'm really happy to be part of a civil society in Sabah that is growing in size and growing in strength. And I think it's becoming a viable future and a viable career for young people. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about Forever Sabah. It will be a sort of truncated version of the story, given the amount of time. So don't get lost in this. We call it the Forever Sabah ecology. I'll walk you through it. So zooming in, the center of Forever Sabah, we have the living landscape and the living seascape, sort of, you know, in a yin-yang whole. And in the middle, you see nature, culture, economy. So we believe nature gives way to culture, which gives way to the economy. We work in 4 areas: food, agriculture, fisheries, energy, infrastructure, waste, forest, water, and soil, livelihood, tourism, and enterprise. And this came about really as a deep engagement process over 2 years with the different sectors. It was not something that we designed in isolation. It was very much done with the various sectors. What emerges from there are our programmatic areas. So we're focused on the sustainability of palm oil, moving that to the best possible standards by 2025. You know, watersheds, we look at the unit as watersheds rather than, you know, I think that we think that that's the natural unit of an area. So coming out from there are a suite of projects across these focal areas. So if you look here, payment for ecosystem services, that's about how water users in Kota Kinabalu will, in their water bills, eventually pay a small sum to take care of the watershed that supplies their water. We work with revitalization of paddy among smallholders. We're doing a roadmap for rural electrification in Sabah using renewables. We work with alternative livelihoods, fisheries, etc. If you go to this strange needle that looks more like a necktie, everything we do engages with the communities of that place. Citizen science is the citizens themselves asking the questions that are important to them, and, you know, building the mechanisms to learn more and find the answers that are important to them. Spatial.
Hello, Cynthia, can't hear you.
Yep, we might have lost Cynthia for a second. Maybe we'll just give her a minute to come back on.
Yeah, we give a minute, Cynthia, to going on.
You know, convenings, designing formats of projects, and then communicating among.
Oh, we lose Cynthia Ong, maybe because of the.
She's here, but she's rejoined us again. Sorry, yeah. Cynthia, you were disconnected a bit earlier. You're still on mute. So
yeah, please, Cynthia.
I don't know where I fell off, but I'll just continue. Okay.
Yeah, you can. You are lost a part of partners collaboration, okay. Engaging.
So this all that we do is about building partnerships and collaborations through a methodology of facilitation and design. Communications is about how we share these stories, both in Sabah and outside. And Forever Sabah Institute is turning all the things that we do into learning spaces, particularly for young people. Okay, then zooming out. Oops. We have the governance. So the board that we have is across the sectors. of 9 people. They represent governments, private sector, civil society, communities, and science. Finance is obviously how we fund everything here, which is a range of different, blended finance, if you like. And then coordination is how we juggle all these balls, keep them in the air. So the whole thing is about a vision to transform from a linear extractive economy to one that is diversified, equitable, and circular. I think that's all I have to share, and then I'm open to questions that you may have. Sorry, there's a wasp here in the room and it's like dancing around my head.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Very nice PowerPoint. One PowerPoint, but tell everything there, so we can starting conversation after this, or we can look at the question from the participant after this. But from the short presentation, we know that Forever Sabah is trying to engage many many parties, government agencies, community, and private sector to setting together and then find some solution. So since Forever Sabah also do some case study and then bring it to in the high level from bottom up to highest to make to find a solution, yeah. And then a lot of engagement participation from the young youths, especially in the grassroots level. That's part of important keys from Cynthia presentation. So anything, any clarification or question, just please put in the chat box. Yeah. So thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, we move to our third speaker is Kaleo Manuel. Kaleo is from Hawaii. Yeah, when I'm see the Hawaii and then I'm trying to squeeze the globe with the Hawaii. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Kaleo is from Hawaii Department and Land Natural Resources. And then short biodata is Kaleo is a native Hawaiian, cultural practitioner and environment planner. Kaleo also focused on elevating indigenous knowledge in the field of water advocacy and resource management in Hawaii. So the floor is yours, Kaleo.
Aloha and mahalo for the introduction. I have 4 slides, I think, to share. And so while that's going, one of the things that we do in Hawaii when we open space and hold space is to bring ourselves and our ancestors and those around us with us to the space, especially when we're new. And it's part of how we introduce ourselves. So I'm just going to open with a short chant, an oli that we do and I'll explain it after. So. Kevelina maine ke kimi o lalo na o ka uka na hele o puna a ka I ka no kaukai kaukai no ka ne te papai lohi alo ka lohe lani a pi lani la e ala e ai ua maona o ka ne I ka awa ua kau ke hai ka una ke hi o lani I ka moena ki pa ia e ke kapa ka noe ka o pa a kai a ki ni la ula e ala e ai Ino no kani. Mahalo. Thanks for having me. So again, Kaleo Manuel, I'm the Deputy Director with the State of Hawaii Commission on Water Resource Management. So I work for state government here in Hawaii. On the top right-hand corner of the slide is our logo. And I have this saying here that we have in Hawaii, Ola I ka wai, water is life, or we live because of water. And we'll get into kind of the chant and my worldview on what I do. So next slide. you can press one more time and I think the image should come up. Okay, perfect. So the chant that I did was in honor of our Hawaiian god for water, and his name is Kane. So this is kind of like a visual to depict this this God of ours and the sanctity that we give and how we revere water from a Hawaiian perspective. Water in Hawaiian is vai. It's called vai. And that was in the earlier slide. And so when we look at vai, water itself is kinolau, or what we call an earthly manifestation of our God, Kane. And so we treat water as if it's godly, right? It has that sanctity, that which gives us life. And so we have tons of chants and stories about this, the spiritualness and the sacredness and the sanctity of water. And it really creates the worldview from a Native Hawaiian perspective on how we view water. And so even more so that the word for wealth, having wealth, was vai vai. It's a duplication of water. When somebody had abundance of water, they were wealthy. Our legal system and how we operated as society also had the word vai in it, called kana vai, which means law. So what it's showing, and what the point of this slide is the worldview of Hawaiians, of Kanaka in Hawaii, is that water is all around us. It's in us, it connects us, it's in the sunrise and then the sunsets, it's in the food that we eat, it's in the water that we drink, it's in the mountains and the rivers. And with that in mind, there's this relationship we have with land and water resources. And so that worldview of being connected not only spiritually to water, but also relationship-wise, familial relationship with that resource, really sets the tone and foundation in which and how I approach water resource management, but also from a Native Hawaiian point of view. And so this balance between people, place, and the protocol, engaging in that calling of our ancestors to space, is really that important and a foundation in which I do the job that I do today. So next slide. And so in Hawaii, I think kind of one of the things that Cynthia talked about, which is watershed. This is kind of a depiction of kind of what our traditional watershed system and land tenure system look like. And in Hawaii, we have a term called ahupua'a, and that is the term for a simplified version of watershed. And so, you know, in ahupua'a, it had all of the resources needed to sustain life, the livelihoods and the well-being of society. And so from the mountain regions where we had, you know, our forests that were acted as sponges that caught the clouds and the rain and recharged our aquifers that flowed down through streams and rivers, providing drinking water, water for farming and cultivation, and then all the way out to our estuary environments and our marine resources that created an ecosystem to support fisheries. And so you had this, what we call from the uplands out into the sea, this land tenure system and this relationship in how we approach water resource management historically. And so what I've been doing over the course of 10 years in my efforts to, as an environmental planner and as a cultural practitioner, is to constantly remind the modern systems and the modern day decision makers that we have this really eloquent traditional worldview and system of water resource management that we can always tap into and learn from and guide us in the decisions that we're making today. And so I'm constantly trying to find ways to incorporate and elevate traditional ecological knowledge, you know, indigenous wisdom, communities' lived experience, generations of relationships with place in the things that we do here in Hawaii. And so how we do that, and last slide real quick to just talk about what I do, is we do that through, there's a term in Hawaiian called pono, it's balance. It's to, you know, create equity, you heard equity a lot, but to create, you know, good balance in the world we live in. And so what I'm responsible for in my day-to-day job is the protection and management of Hawaii's water resources. So that map that I showed in the first slide had the 8 major islands in the state of Hawaii. And that includes surface water resources. So you can see on the top right, there's a stream that's being completely diverted and dewatered by a historic diversion. And those were usually put in during the sugar plantation era in the early 1900s that really cut off streams connectivity from the uplands out into the ocean. And then we also manage groundwater resources. And for the purpose of continuing to grow kalo, which is taro, our staple food here in Hawaii, or traditionally was a staple food for our people. And then our aquatic species that live in our freshwater systems. And so while we want to protect and manage our resources, we also want to promote really reasonable and beneficial uses of water that make sense for our current society. And so it's a constant balance of protection and management while also utilizing the resource. And so we look at and manage resources throughout the state that way. And in this position, I'm the first, I think, Native Hawaiian to hold this position in state government. And so I've brought, in my opinion, a new perspective, which isn't a new, it's a traditional worldview, a Native Hawaiian worldview to the space that has oftentimes been occupied by those that don't have that worldview. So it's been challenging, it's been eye-opening, and it's an appointed position with the governor. So I have about 14 months left in my term here with my current position. So land use and water resource management is part of my passion and what I do here in Hawaii. I think that's plenty of conversation. I'll turn it back to Nasir.
Yeah, thanks, Kaleo. Yeah, a great photo. Yes, amazing animation. Yeah, into that slide. Yeah, in the Kaleo sharing to us about relationship with from indigenous people, relationship with resources. Yeah, that's we are be part of biodiversity. Yeah, and then Kaleo also mentioned that sharing that from the traditional knowledge, they are adapting in the modern concept to make sure that our resources are been balanced. Yeah, so that is a part of important point I saw during the presentation. So anything question from to Kaleo, please write in the chat box. Yeah. So yeah, we are already finished three sharing from our speaker, from Peter, Cynthia, and Kaleo. Just now is Kaleo. So we move to question and answer. So anything question, please be put in the chat box. Yeah. Yeah. We look at the question from the floor. Many question we already received a few questions here, especially from especially for Peter Kallang. 1, 2, 3, 5 questions for Peter Kallang. One question is from Sharir. Yeah, sorry if I'm not. Yeah, the question is: are there any conservation progress on the upper Limbang River in Mantawi? Yeah, Peter. Question raised to Peter.
At the moment, our focus is in that area which is already being approved by the Sarawak government and also ITTO, which is in the Upper Baram area. But as far as I know, there is no initiative done in Limbang, not officially anyway. But I wouldn't be surprised because our friends there, the Penan community, they have been working a lot there, and they have nurseries and all that for tree replanting. That is the best I know, but there is no official endorsement given by the authority. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Another question from the floor to you, Peter, from Carissa. The question is, could you please elaborate a little bit more on of the degraded forest areas in the Barampis Park? What are the key barriers moving forward, and are they minimizing PACES example experts?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, I was mentioning about joint governance. That means to say the communities, the government, and NGOs working together in this process. In other words, you mentioned earlier on, Nasiri, about bottom up. So this is the concept that we have in this project. But this concept, you know, we are sailing in uncharted waters. It is very hard, because why I'm saying that is because there is no land code or forest ordinance that provides for that in Sarawak, or in, I'm not sure, but I don't think they even have it in Semenanjung or Sabah, yeah, in the term that we're talking about. That is one of the greatest barrier. So what we are trying to do is get the government to do a gazette, and after that, the land code and, you know, the forest ordinance will come later. So the barrier, the biggest hurdle that we go through is both from the government and the law, and also some of the community members who cannot accept this. This is very, we are trying to do something which is not being practiced in the past, and it's hard for people to understand. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, a lot of question to you, Peter. Yeah, from Priscilla is, I will read that Bakundam is actually more than enough to power the whole Malaysia. Why do we still continue build a dam?
This is a question that best answered by the government or the Sarawak Energy, but their excuse is that they are trying to power industries which are energy intensive industries like smelting plants and all that. And not only that, they are talking about exporting power not only to West Malaysia, Singapore, and Sabah, but also to Brunei, and even the southern part of the Philippines and Indonesia. In fact, they're already exporting power to Kalimantan, Indonesia. And they're very excited because Indonesia is moving the capital from Java to Kalimantan. So that's what they're talking about. Because now our petroleum is going down, less and less of it. I mean, we almost finished. So this is one big source of money that the government is trying to think about.
Wow, thank you, Peter. Another question to you, Peter, from Rocket Jambung. Hi, everyone. There has been contradictory deny statement by various authorities regarding the recent log jam in Bala. Can Peter share his comment on the matter?
Thank you, Nasiri. So on the log jam, let me just highlight one thing from the previous question as well. The proposal by the government to increase the power supply, when you look at it, you know, in percentage, the amount that they propose compared to the organic growth of power demand in Sarawak is more than the power supply required for China at the peak of its industrialization. Yeah. So that was very unreasonable, actually. So the log jam, you know, when they build dams, what they do is they do logging. They call it salvage logging. Salvage logging is to clear the organic materials which could be submerged in the water, you know, and therefore would produce methane and all greenhouse gases if you don't remove it. So the idea is to remove all these organic materials so that, you know, you reduce the radiation from your dam. But what they have done here, the people who are given license to do the salvage logging, they just chop the tree and take those that are economical. They are, you know, allowed. I mean, they can sell, and then just dump everything else there. So that's why you have a log jam when you have a flood or the logs come down. But now they are trying to blame the indigenous people, the farmers there who do shifting cultivation. But the farmers, they don't use bulldozers and all machines in order to log. You know, they cut a few trees. How big is their what do you call this farm compared to the size of the reservoir that is for the hydroelectric dam? So it is not fair to blame the farmers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, a lot of questions coming here. So I need to move to another to Cynthia, to our second speaker. That's a question from Navin. Cynthia, can you share how you started on his journey with Forever Sabah?
Thanks for the question. I think we started to see that the issues in Sabah had very specific themes around, food or forests, water, and we looked at what other parts of the world, like Costa Rica, Bhutan, had done at a kind of systems level across the state. So we asked the question, what would it look like if we did that in Sabah? So rather than have projects that were, this project to address this or that project to address this, what if we looked at it as a system? So we put that forth to the government and said, what would Sabah look like in 50 years if we continued on our current development trajectory? So when you ask that question to logging companies or civil society or government, you get a range of very interesting answers. And I think we dived quite deep into what it could look like in 50 years. And so Forever Sabah was birthed from that process, and the idea that we needed to shift all our drivers, our economic drivers, and instead of linear and extractive, meaning you have your forest asset, you lose it, and you have money. That would be a simplified description of a linear economy. How do we keep our forests forever, and benefit wise, use it wisely for forever, for future generations. So I think it was wanting to disrupt the trajectory that we are on, which we knew was not going to lead us to a sustained thriving place. So that was the inspiration, I think, that led to Forever Sabah.
Thanks, Cynthia. Question on the floor for Kaleo. That's question from Emelina. The question is, can you share with us challenge faced by indigenous community in Hawaii, particularly with regards to the environment? Cynthia, can Cynthia share some similar challenges in Borneo? So Kaleo first, after that we give to Cynthia. Yeah.
Mahalo, thank you, Amelina, for the question. In short, I think like most indigenous people that have faced, the effects of colonization, land displacement is a huge issue. And I can't get into the history of Hawaii's land displacement of Native people, but our natives were displaced from their traditional lands. And with that left, severed their relationship and the protocols that I talked about, that relationship and kinship to the places that they were tied to. And, I think there's this historic trauma that's continued to plague our Native Hawaiian community. And because of that have faced societal ills, highest incarceration rates, highest poverty rates in our own homeland because of some of those historic traumas. So I think those, are some huge environmental impacts that have occurred and continue to occur today. But the good thing is there's, been a reawakening and a reconnection to our resources. It happened probably in the late 70s. But one of the great things in Hawaii that I would use as a benefit is Water, I'll use water as an example. Water in Hawaii is not owned by anyone, and it's consistent with our traditional worldview, but also we were a kingdom at one time before US illegally overthrew our kingdom and our queen. And so we had laws, and as part of that law, water was not owned by anyone, but it was held in trust for the benefit of all. And so that framework continues today in Hawaii. And so we are just stewards of those resources. And so with that kind of traditional worldview, current legal framework, it gives us the opportunity to really find ways to share water resources. But even within that legal framework, there's systems that exist that really manage power, right? And who has access to water resources and so forth. And so, you know, Native Hawaiian communities have had to resort to working within the system. I'm an example of that, to try to find and hold space. And then there's always the role of external pressure and peaceful protest, and holding decision makers accountable, or, you know, participating in the democratic process and getting elected into positions of power and decision making. So those things have really helped move us forward. We still have a lot of work to do in Hawaii to improve our environment and do things. I do want to riff off of what Cynthia said. This linear economy is real. In Hawaii, we have a very extractive linear economy. Military and tourism are two primary drivers. And because of that, and as an island nation, an island state, we've become extremely reliant on you know, external imports. And there's this movement, you know, there's a native movement called the Aloha Aina Economic Futures Movement to not restore back to relying on military and tourism as our primary economies, but to really shift, as Cynthia said, to a circular economy that's really based on place-based, you know, aloha that we have for our land. So I'll drop a link in the chat of that movement that's happening right now in Hawaii. And that kind of was birthed out of COVID. And the need to kind of reassess what we as Native Hawaiians want to see our future look like.
Thank you, Kaleo. Yeah, over to you, Cynthia. Same question. What happened in Sabah?
I think you're probably the better person to answer that question, but I'll give it a go. I think, you know, Kaleo brought up the word colonization. I think you know, we have a history of colonization, of course, and the laws, the institutions that you know, emerge from that history perpetuates the same system. So power and control is in the hands of some, and diminishes the many, who, particularly those living closely to the land and the seas. So the patronage culture, which is what I call it, you know, for example, divides up our forests into plots that are then given out to companies who have the right to log them. And then, you know, the people who've been there for generations somehow do not have those rights. I mean, for us in Forever Sabah, the circular economy being equitable and diversified is specifically to disrupt that balance of power, if you like, from the ground up. You know, and making, you know, knowing that our number one allies are the people living closely to the land and the sea and the coasts, and, you know, building mechanisms where they are at the table and their wisdom and their generational experience is heard.
Thank you, Cynthia, Kaleo and Cynthia, for that question. Yeah, a lot of a lot of question on the floor now. Next question for Kaleo from Ajkila. The question is, how is the management of traditional knowledge like in Hawaii? What kind of initiative have been instituted in face times? Over to you,
Yeah.
Kaleo.
Maybe I'll try to answer the question. I think, you know, traditionally we were an oral society, so traditions were passed on from generation to generation, through chants, through stories, through our songs. I'm a hula practitioner, so I dance hula, but it's not just about dancing, it's really talking and continuing those stories of our ancestors. And so when we talk about traditional knowledge, there are knowledge keepers, right? And so oftentimes those knowledge keepers transmit to those that have the responsibility or who they choose to be worthy of that kind of knowledge. And so I think one of the things that's really interesting in Hawaii is there's this Western mind view that if I pay you, you educate me, I can take that knowledge and then commodify it or use it for, you know, my individual economic benefit. And so there's tension there, right? That I can pay for something that maybe I want, but it's not yours to take. And so when we talk about traditional knowledge, some of the things that we are challenged with here in Hawaii is, as keepers of traditional knowledge, how you share it, where and who you share it with is really important, and how you manage that data, because sometimes it is used against you in battles against, you know, water rights battles or environment. It's also used and commodified, and so we are struggling, I think, in the balance of how do we share this wisdom and really change the trajectory and disrupt the system, as Cynthia said, to hold that space for traditional knowledge, but yet not let it be commodified or to be used in ways that we don't want it to be used. There's a program, another partnership I'm part of. It's called Kaleo Manuel Collective. And it's us as Native Hawaiians re-envisioning how we care for our sacred places. And one of the focuses of that is how we become better knowledge stewards of these traditional systems, and who are the keepers, and how do we institutionalize that, and who manages that. We haven't figured out the answer, but the idea is to work with our collective community to think through how we want to see that happen, especially in the digital age we have today, right? So anybody can type hula in YouTube and watch a hula clip and pretend they're a hula dancer, but are they truly and authentically a hula practitioner? Probably not. But because it's so free and that we're so connected, if I'm not familiar with that practice, how do I know what's real and what's not real, right? What's authentic and what's genuine? And that goes with any data set. I mean, I think we're dealing with that now in COVID and the conspiracies and the conversations, like who is a true expert and a knowledge keeper, and who do we in society seek out as those keepers of knowledge? And so I always hold space for our traditional practitioners and our knowledge keepers, because sometimes they're overlooked by those with, you know, the degrees and the couple digit, you know, letters behind their name. But yeah, I kind of went around in circle in terms of trying to answer the question. I think there's good examples of how traditional knowledge has been incorporated and managed, but I also have seen it being used in ways that I don't think was intended. And so there's that balance in protecting that.
Thanks, Kaleo. Yeah, we also received question from Facebook Live. The question is to Kaleo from Joe. Thanks, Kaleo. Can I ask if Hawaiian citizens also embrace the belief or spiritual respect or ancestors' belief? That's a question to Kaleo.
Sorry, what can you restate the question?
Yeah, the question is, can I ask if Hawaiian citizens also embrace the belief or spiritual respect or ancestors' belief?
I'll try to answer the question as I understand it.
I think the question is talking more on belief, indigenous belief in the in the Hawaiian indigenous peoples. Yeah.
The animism.
So from Hawaiian spirituality and beliefs.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that one.
Yeah. So there's all types of religions. I think Native Hawaiian kind of epistemology or worldview and spirituality. There are still Native Hawaiians that still practice and worship our gods and multitudes of gods in our places and here in Hawaii. And I think it really comes down to a value set, that there's, we revere land as our ancestor and our elder sibling, and we have a role as a younger sibling to care for that which the word for land in Hawaii is aina, which literally kind of translates to that which feeds or that which sustains. And so as a Native Hawaiian in Hawaii, we have an obligation to protect that which feeds and sustains us. Otherwise, we don't exist. Without land, we don't exist. And so, yeah, that's, I think, a way to answer the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kaleo. Yeah, another one we received question from Facebook is for Peter. How much involvement of local government of Sarawak with safe rivers?
The local government or the state government of Sarawak has been involved with us as far as this Upper Baram forest area is concerned from the time of our previous chief minister, that is Adnan, that is back in, he approved the Upper Baram forest area in 2017. And we have been engaged with the forestry department, having various meetings, went to site and visit the forest, visit the community. We are still having good relationship with them as far as that is concerned up to today. Yeah, and also the as far as the hydroelectric dam is concerned, we we have some sort of engagement with the Sarawak Energy, who is a government-linked company actually. Some sort of engagement has a lot of improvement with the support of our friends from Sabah as well. People like Cynthia Ong is nodding. So that is what I can answer to that.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, we also received question from Ajkila to all speaker. The question is, I will be great to hear more about what next in the journey of overcoming challenges faced by indigenous community. What do you think are the top 3 of key focus area? That's a question for our speaker. Yeah, who is want to start first?
Let ladies go first.
Okay, ladies go first.
I would say the top 3 would be land, livelihoods, and voice. Meaning voice at the decision-making tables. Land is just their right to land. Instead of being squeezed out to, the edges of forests or seas or mangroves. And of course their right to livelihood, which is what they always did, living, coexisting with lands and seas. And I think the law of the land is so different today, and I think it will become increasingly so with the Pan-Borneo Highway and capital city of Indonesia, moving to Borneo, you know, all these things that will give more privileges to the already privileged. Yeah, so I would say that those are the top three things: land, livelihoods, and voice. And how, you know, how can we be better allies so that those things are protected.
Thanks, Cynthia. Peter, before we traveling to Hawaii.
Can you repeat that question again, Nasiri?
The question is, I will be great to hear more about what next in the journey of overcoming challenges faced by indigenous community. What do you think are the top 3 or key focus area?
This is a challenges faced by the indigenous community themselves.
Yep.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that that come to the top of my head is that the indigenous community, I think, is in Sarawak, and I think it's the same in Sabah as well. Yeah, we have great respect for our leaders. Yeah, and the leaders are the ones who make decisions. You know, are not known to be so democratic and the one, because this is our tradition. That's how we existed before the government was even there. That's why we were able to unite and then overcome challenges. So that thing, although we have been educated and all that, we somehow inherited. We have great respect. So in other words, decisions are a lot of times made by the leaders, and then he will share with the people, and people agree, and then they will go ahead with it. But I'm going to say something very sensitive here. Sorry, I've been saying it. Nowadays, how the leaders are appointed in the communities, they are being appointed by the government. Yeah, and not only are they appointed by the government, they also paid allowances. And another thing is, they also, when the timber company comes or the plantation people come, they too give allowances to this headman. So, but the problem is, these headmen that are appointed by the government, they are not necessarily accepted by the communities. So there are certain cases where in one small community, they have two headmen. One is the one appointed by the government. Another one is appointed by the people themselves, recognized by the people themselves. So this causes a lot of problem. It causes a lot of division among the people. And then that's why a lot of villages, not only in my part of Sarawak, but all over Sarawak, because this law was just imposed a few years ago, that the government has to say in appointing the village headman. And then second thing is, these people don't have enough information. No, let's take, for example, the government want to do sustainable, forestry. Yeah, sustainable forestry. And then if you read all these procedures that is set by the authorities, what to do when you have a sustainable forestry, is start with free, prior, and informed consent. In other words, we're trying to get it bottom up. Yeah, but that is not properly carried out. So in other words, people don't have enough information. Yeah? That is second. Third thing is, the people are not given the full information on regard to the what they call their rights, like the United Nations Declaration on the Indigenous Peoples and all that. They are not aware of that. The rights with regard to the national constitution as well. As indigenous people, you have a right to live where you want, to make self-determination. They are not aware of that. So that is one thing that our people, because there's not enough information going down to them. So I would classify into that three areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, Kaleo, over to you.
Yeah, I would I mean, those are great areas where I think Native people or Indigenous people face challenges within and from the existing system. And, I just echo everything that was said. I think, kind of what Cynthia said is, riffing off of the voice, and having a voice, not only a voice, but an actual vote or a decision-making voice, not, an equal voice, but almost a greater voice, is something that's needed to really honor, Indigenous people in their homeland. I think back on, I got some clarity on the question prior. Hawaiians currently make up, I think, about 24% of the population, Native Hawaiians in Hawaii. So only a quarter. And not everyone, not even amongst Native Hawaiians, not all Native Hawaiians still honor that traditional worldview of land and water and protection. But it doesn't mean that's not what the traditional value set here in Hawaii was and should be. And so we're constantly trying to be that voice at the table to remind everyone about their commitment, as newcomers to our island. And if you want and call Hawaii home, that there's this, what we call kuleana, a responsibility and a reciprocal responsibility to this place to participate and uplift those values. And so I will say that, another thing that I think is hard is Native people's they're not always invited to the table. And so they've had to fight to get a seat there. And so we need to really I've been focusing on changing that, to put the burden on the agency, put the burden on the government to consult with, right? Free, informed, prior consent before moving forward on anything. And you have an obligation to reach out to these communities and ensure that their rights are protected, that you build their capacity, that you communicate with them in everything that you do. And oftentimes it's working through difference and sitting at the table with the people that you don't agree with and don't have shared values with, because you have to have, for us, it's what I've realized is working with those people and sharing those values that sometimes they don't even know. That's how, I don't want to say ignorant they are. Sometimes it's arrogance, but working across and through differences has really helped me in some of the movements. And I've seen some successful movements happen when you can get polar opposites to come together on maybe one shared value set. And then from that, it's about building that relationship over time. And you see that change in value set. And so that's one maybe recommendation to, leaders that are coming up is speak your truth, know that you and your perspective and your story is unique and no one can tell that story except for you. And that adds value to every space that you enter. And remember that. Don't try to be somebody else because it's not worth it, and I think that's a good way to frame some of the challenges, but opportunities. We provide value as Native people of our lands. And just remember that.
Yeah, thank you to our speaker. We are run of time, but I think this question is a very important to us, from Jay to our speaker. Yeah, as far as we know, Peter Kallang from oil and gas jumping to activism, Cynthia, Longgenis, and then suddenly jumping into activists. So the question from Jay is, what will I say to encourage and inspire this next generation of change maker? That's a question to our speaker. Yeah. Who is going first? From Hawaii, from Sarawakian, or from Sabah?
Let's allow our guest to come in first.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll start first. It kind of was what I said in the last part of what I was talking about is, know your worth, that you have a story and you belong in those spaces, and never let anyone tell you that you don't, right? I mean, it's very simple. And then, continue to bring your uniqueness to the spaces and the places that you want to see change happen. Because it is about you and the next generation and the generation after you. You know, government will be the beast that it is. You know, systems are there, but they can always be changed. And you are one of a kind, you know, and there's nobody else in this world like you. So just come and bring it all every single time you enter those spaces.
Thank you, Kaleo. Yeah, we go to Sarawak, Peter.
Bukan pergi North Borneo kah?
Oke, mana saja. Begin. Okay.
Cynthia, you go ahead, Cynthia.
I think the fact that you're here in this conversation already means a lot on a Saturday, you know, morning. I'd say, you know, think about what you care about most when you wake up in the morning, what matters to you. Think about what you're good at, what you love doing. Align yourself with what you care about, with something that will serve your land, your people, and line it all up, and then, you know, make the most of it, and don't be afraid to fail, because that's, you know, when we fall flat on our faces and we pick ourselves up, that's when we are learning. So yeah, that would be those are my words.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, last Peter.
Yeah, I would say you can boil it down into two. First thing is know where you are. Second thing is where do you want to be? Know where you are means know the situation, find out more. And do you agree with what is going on around you? What is your right? What should it be? No, I look around a lot of time. You heard, you know the story about Robin Hood robbing the rich to give to the poor. Now they are robbing the poor to give to the rich. That goes on because of the logging, because all this mining, because all that. The people who suffer most are the poor. They are doing this to make sure the rich become richer. So what would you want to do about this? So if you want change, you are the one who is a catalyst of change. Don't wait for other people. Yeah. So it starts from you. So know where you are, look around you, what happened, where should it be, what should be done in order to get where you want to be. That is my advice.
Thank you to our speaker. Yeah, I look our running a time. I went to ask secretariat. I will still have a time to do the question and answer because of I saw a lot of question not been answered here. But for our speaker, okay, please write your contact number in the chat. Otherwise, our participant can have a specific question to you all, so can be follow up. Yeah, after this, yeah, we are now is already. Yeah, we are running our time, but I'm asked Navin, we still can continue or.
Yeah, maybe we can have one last question, Nasiri, from the floor.
Okay, thank you. We still have a last question. We check question from the floor. Yeah, for the last question, is from me. We know that now is we are in the pandemic can be happen across the globe. So from your experience, Peter, Cynthia, Kaleo, how indigenous peoples, I'm talking on security food, because of a lot of indigenous peoples, as far as we know, very demanding on resources. So how they survive during this pandemic? Yeah, I give it to Peter first.
Thank you, Nasri. we have been in contact with a lot of people. With our focus, because we have some grant which we use in order to support those people impacted by the lockdown. And we found out the people who really need it most are the urban poor, and we interview them. Why are they, why are they in town in the first place? Because we found out a lot of them were urban rural migrant. In other words, they came from the kampong and they came down to town, the cities, in order to look for jobs and things, and of course to be near to the amenities provided in the cities, like the hospitals, like education facilities and all the rest of it. Yeah, even telecommunication. You remember that classic story about this girl in Sabah who climbed the tree because she had to do her exam. There was no internet. So that is the thing that they're trying to avoid, trying to come to the town so that they can have connections and all that. But the lockdown, because of the lockdown, a lot of them were jobless. But on the other hand, the people who are still in the rural area, in the kampongs and longhouses and all that, although there was a lockdown, they were still able to fish at the rivers. They're still able to plant the vegetables and all that. They're able to survive. They are resilient. The only thing they need would be like sugar, salt, and cooking oil, things like that. Otherwise, there's not much change as far as the livelihood is concerned. So that is one great example, that what happened when the development is only in the cities, but the rural folks are being neglected. The infrastructure is so bad in Sabah and Sarawak. We have the so-called highway. They're all logging roads. So this lockdown has shown that what happened to the indigenous people who have migrated to town. The reason could be because they are. Another reason could be because they have been victims of land grabbings. They lost the land because of the plantations. So that's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next speaker, Kaleo.
I think during access to food, during the pandemic was a real thing here in Hawaii. I think what was great is a lot of our local farmers who are used to exporting foods really refocused and shifted towards providing, creative ways for, curbside delivery into rural communities and to neighborhoods that didn't have access to food and those types of resources. One of the things I thought was really interesting is during this pandemic, there's, a lot of focus on no one going hungry. And one of the things we quickly forget about at least in Hawaii, which is awkward, is that we don't think about not running out of water. We are blessed here in the islands to have access to, amazing drinkable water, very clean, pretty pure and fresh. But there isn't a lot of proactive focus on that kind of work to make sure that exists into the future. And so, creating the same type of energy and commitment to making sure no one goes hungry is something that I'm continuously trying to promote for water, that we will make sure everyone has access to clean, drinkable water, no matter where they are in our communities. Some of the work that we've been doing here in Hawaii. I don't know if that answers the question directly, but it's kind of what came to mind.
Thank you, Kaleo. The last, Cynthia.
For us here, I think we focused our response on food, particularly revitalizing the practice of planting rice. So Sabah only plants 25% of what it consumes. The rest are imported. So imagine a scenario where, climate change or whatever, and people stop exporting their rice. We only have 25% of what we need in terms of rice supply. So we wanted to show that small farmers can achieve food sovereignty by planting their own rice. And we did it in this collection of villages here where I live. And we got to, in just 1 year of planting through COVID, something like 75% food security for the folks here. So showing that it can be done if this was something the government and civil society put their focused energy to, that people can be food sovereign. And I think the other thing that we did was also support digital connection for communities so that they could connect with their partners and each other during these times of lockdown.
Yeah, thank you to our speaker on that last question. We are sorry, we are running of time, but those questions not been answered here. We can give copy to our speaker and then can follow up after this. Yeah, after 1 hour, we are discussing a lot of issue. We heard about what happened in Borneo, Sabah, in Sarawak. We heard about dam, destructive industry, military, all this thing, and then from the sharing from our speaker is we are here is indigenous peoples, young people, so we are part of frontliner to make sure our resources being conserved. And then conservation is beyond from that. From us as a people, indigenous peoples, conservation means we must be looking in the livelihoods, our identity, culture, all that thing. Yeah, that's point few point from me to during this sharing and question and answer. So once again, thank you to our speaker, Peter Kallang from Sarawak, Cynthia, and then Kaleo, Fa. But we are connect together, yeah. So please, those participants, anything question, please in the chat box. Our panel already give their email, so free to ask. Okay, yeah, that's only from me. So anything wrong from my side? Sorry, sekali lagi terima kasih. Yeah, I give it back to Navin.
Thank you so much, Nasiri, and thank you again, speakers Kaleo, Cynthia, Peter, for joining us this morning.